Hello, Intro to Film Studies. This brief video is going to be an introduction to Do the Right Thing, which is the film you will watch this week and we will discuss next Monday. And then I'm also going to introduce you to your final essay assignment, which we talked about last week. You kind of know what's coming, but I just wanted to very quickly walk through the assignment with you. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the brief PowerPoint for Do the Right Thing. So tonight in class, we will be discussing The Last Picture Show, which begins this trilogy of The Last Picture Show, Do the Right Thing, and Jackie Brown of modern American films that you can choose from to write about in your final essay. So hopefully you enjoyed The Last Picture Show, and we will, again, have a good in-depth conversation about that in class. And then up next, you'll watch Do the Right Thing. Promo image. It's a very, very colorful film, which I know is probably kind of a breath of fresh air because even after the advent of color in film, I show you a lot of black and white films anyway. So you can see even in the poster the beautiful saturation of film, of colors. So this film came out in 1989. It's an American film. Director Spike Lee. The cast, you'll probably recognize some of the cast members. Very young Giancarlo Esposito, who many of you might know as Gus Fring on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee. Ossie Davis plays the mayor, and Ruby Dee, they were married in real life. A really incredible couple of actors and activists from the civil rights era. Danny Aiello, Spike Lee himself stars in the film, John Turturro and Frankie Faison. So you'll probably recognize some of these actors. Spike Lee also wrote the film. So he's a writer and director. So the synopsis, and this comes from the Criterion Collection essay, "The hottest day of the year explodes on screen in this vibrant look at a day in the life of Bedford's Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. Featuring a stellar ensemble cast that includes, I just read you all of those names, also includes Samuel L. Jackson in one of his early roles, Bill Nunn, Rosie Perez. Spike Lee's powerful portrait of urban racial tensions sparked controversy while earning popular and critical praise." Roger Ebert, and all of these reviews are up on Moodle for you to delve into more. Ebert said, "Most movies remain up there on the screen, only a few penetrate the soul. Spike Lee has done almost an impossible thing. He'd made a movie about race in America that empathized with all of the participants. He didn't draw lines or take sides, but simply looked with sadness at one racial flashpoint that stood for many others." I love this description of the film because it is so incredibly accurate, and I think what makes the film continue to be so powerful. There aren't necessarily clear heroes or villains. The title of the film, Do the Right Thing, and we will discuss this next week together, do you think, what does that mean in the context of the film? Who does the right thing? And oftentimes your answer to that question reflects your perspective and in your own identity. So I think we're supposed to challenge what we think the answer is to that question. And the idea is that there aren't any clear answers and how uncomfortable that is. We're meant to feel discomfort quite a bit in this film. None of these people is perfect, but Lee makes it possible for us to understand their feelings. His empathy is crucial to the film because if you can't try to understand how the other person feels, you're captive inside the box of yourself, which is something we should all attempt to avoid at all costs. So style, some things to look for stylistically. The soundtrack, so the diegetic sound, both diegetic and non-diegetic. The use of Public Enemy's Do the Right Thing throughout the film is really important. I've included up on Moodle the lyrics to that song and the music video from that song. But we think about how that song permeates the film and how the boombox plays a really important part in the film. So pay attention to the use of music. And of course, Samuel L. Jackson, his role as a DJ, playing music that the community, the street, can hear. The soundtrack, the score to the film was written by Spike Lee's father, who's a jazz musician. We get some breaks for realism, the art of montage. So in one iconic segment of the film, individual characters look straight into the camera and spout off racial and ethnic slurs about another group of people. So this use of montage to make us feel discomfort, to implicate us, it's not part of the storyline, but it's a very important part of the story. Some slow motion sequences that focus on the way people look at each other. Pay attention to that. Camera angles. We see a lot of canted angles, sometimes also referred to as Dutch angles. This suggests dysfunction. It makes you feel like the world is off kilter a little bit. The camera speed, sometimes it's fast, which leads to feelings of tension and confusion. And also camera distance, so close-ups that make us feel emotional connection. So in a review from the AV Club talking about the use of Public Enemy's Fight the Power, and so the layers of that film's role, the song's role in the film, and how it also is effective in, like it points out here, Radio Raheem is kind of, that's the song that we associate with him, and it announces his arrival. So yeah, that's, and pointing at, that Lee essentially turns his principal cast into Batman villains, creating the impression that everyone involved is equally maniacal. It's a technique usually reserved for either horror or camp, implying that racial hostility is some unholy amalgam of the two. Another great kind of line to think about that movie. A very brief historical context. Some of the articles that I've linked for you on Boodle get into a bit more of the historical context that you can read about. One thing to think about is the history of economic discrimination against Blacks in America and business ownership. So there are some conversations about this, that the Asian couple who own the corner store, that's a source of tension for, and the Italian at Sal's Pizzeria, his ownership of the business. So we see the business ownership in the neighborhood being owned by people who don't live in the neighborhood or who have recently immigrated to America. So that even in communities that were predominantly African-American, oftentimes they weren't the ones who had the ability, sometimes through the inability to get loans, kind of racist practices in the banking industry and mortgage industry. There's been a lot of exposés of that even in recent history. And homeownership as well. So when the white guy with the Larry Bird jersey moves in, kind of a comment on gentrification. So the moving in of kind of young hipster white folks into Black neighborhoods, how again, that's still something that's talked about a lot. So we have these historical and cultural, very real issues make an appearance in the film. The historical context of Blaxploitation films. So I give you a bit more about Blaxploitation films for the upcoming week about Jackie Brown and Tarantino's influence, how much he was influenced by Blaxploitation films, but we can still get kind of some of that taste of the 70s Blaxploitation films in Lee's films. Some recent real life crimes that had happened, specifically in 1986 attack in Howard Beach, Queens, which I've provided an article about from the New York Times. So some crimes in there are names at the end of the film that are pulled up kind of in memory, like some real life crimes that had happened, where young men in particular were killed by police officers or white perpetrators who were not brought to justice. So that history, long history and recent history of police brutality and lynching, we're definitely supposed to think about that in the context of the film. and the use of fire hoses in the civil rights movement. So we'll talk about this more next week, but pay attention to scenes, pay attention to the photography and the cinematography that might call to mind some of these historical realities. Okay. So, as a brief addendum to this intro video for this week, I'm going to look quickly at the final essay assignments. And I gave you a teaser for this last week. No surprises. You knew what was coming. You are to critically analyze The Last Picture Show, Do the Right Thing, or Jackie Brown through the lens of critical race theory, Marxist criticism, feminist criticism, or psychoanalytic criticism. So kind of your choice of focusing in on one of these films through one of these critical lenses. There are lots of different ways you can approach this assignment. Some of the films might seem like they kind of fit more directly into one of the critical theory schools of thought, but there are a lot of really creative ways that you can approach this assignment. So you are to write a reflection as kind of our normal reflection process for each of these films. You might want to use that as kind of a pre-writing exercise, imagining how you might approach one of these films. So then after you've seen Jackie Brown, you can choose which film and which approach and write your final essay using that approach. So there are a lot of sources up on Moodle, as you know, from having to scroll by them. Your textbook has a wealth of information. You likely won't have to go much farther beyond those sources to do any kind of further research. The film is what you want your focus to be on. Your film is the primary source. So the film, and it's kind of nice that you can go back in and stream it whenever you like in the Swank website. You can relook at it and draw very clear examples from the film to, again, make your argument about how it fits into one of those critical theories. Your final essay will be about 4 pages, not counting the works cited page. So MLA style, in-text citations, include a works cited page, and you'll notice on the second page, I give you all the information you need about each of the films. I know that you're streaming them, but just for the ease of making a works cited page, I've given you the information. If the model you're using wants the format, you can just put DVD in there. So this isn't an MLA style. You will need to use NightSight or use a handbook to put it in MLA style for your works cited page, but that's all the information that you need for the films themselves. So we'll talk more about this. Be brainstorming now, taking notes. Let me know if you have any questions. And we will discuss more in depth next week, Do the Right Thing. So take notes, pay attention, and let me know if you have any questions about anything.